Okay, today's learning is in the merit of Refuah Shlema for Chaya Bas Leah, Binyamin Ben Leah, Noam Ben Tammy, and Le'ili Nishmas Kuna Ben Michal Yankel, and whose yahrzeit is on Tes Shvat.
Thank you.
Okay, so picking up where we left off. Which is that the innovation of Tanya to shift from the normal way of thinking of a Yetzer Hara and a Yetzer Tov to a Nefesh Bahamas, Nefesh Elokis, from the good and evil inclinations to a godly soul and an animal soul, based on the writings of the Arizal, in turn based on a pasuk, as we learned last time. And what's the innovation? That a person shouldn't be fooled into thinking that he has to really understand where the battle begins. Understand your enemy. Again, references, I suppose, to modern contemporary affairs. People misjudged the enemy on October 6th, and that's what led to October 7th, whatever the reports will be. But when a person doesn't understand his enemy, it's hard to, you're just waiting for if something will happen, then I'm going to fight. We see how that went. A physical example in everybody's life, if a person wants to be healthy, so he says, I'm going to stop eating junk food. Okay, I'm done. So it's as simple as that. I know right now it didn't feel good 5 minutes ago, and it didn't feel good yesterday. I'm gaining weight. It's hard to breathe. The doctor says it's not good. The lawyer says it's not good. Everyone says it's not good, and that's it. I'm done. So when it comes up, but I'll start tomorrow actually, right? So tonight I'll just have my last ice cream and cake and candy, etc., and cola. But when tomorrow comes, so it doesn't really start either, and it's not just because the classic joke will start tomorrow. It's understanding where the problem is, that there's actually a part of me that likes it. I have to deal with the part of me that likes it and explain to that part what's not good about it. It's not just the fact that I don't feel good right now and that I'm overweight. The actual desire itself has to be taken care of. So the fight with the Nefesh Bahamas has to be understood that there's an animal part of myself which its whole identity is bound up with disconnecting from Hashem. It's not its core, not its essence. It's godly as everything else has a godly essence. But its whole identity is an entrapment to find anything that's pleasurable. So I have to explain to that part of myself, including in other words, there's a deep part of myself that understands that the world is about having fun. The world is about pleasure. And of course, pleasure and having fun are part of the world, but that's not the essence of the world. I have to explain that the deeper delight and deeper satisfaction that comes is only from connecting to the inner aspect of what delight and pleasure are all about, and what fun is all about, which is connecting to the core of godliness, the core godly identity of everything, not getting stuck in the external trappings, which we're going to talk about right now. So now that we know that there's two souls, in other words, not just tomorrow morning I'm going to have a desire for candy and I'll leave it alone until the desire comes. The Yetzer Hara, no way he's going to win. No, I have to actually start right this second in internalizing what it is that's bad about the candy, what is that bad about the cake and the coffee and the cigarettes and whatever it might be. Okay, again, and this is just in a health idea. So the same is true in the Avodas Hashem idea. To explain to the Nefesh Bahamas, not just wait for the Yetzer Hara to turn into something that I know tomorrow I want to disconnect from Hashem, but right now I'm solid. When it comes, I'll defeat it. No, realize right now there's a part of me that actually is not interested consciously in connecting, and that's the idea of two souls. As the Alter Rebbe was going to now for several chapters, describe those two, the structure of those two souls, which is intellect, a part of intellect. Each one of the souls has intellect. Again, my understanding of the world. Is it all about godliness or is it all about something else? The two identities. My attractions in the world. Is it all about feeling a connection with Hashem or feeling whatever Hashem wants, that's what I should feel? Or feeling some sort of satisfaction and connection to who knows what, that just as long as it feels good. I have to deal with those things as well. So here's the character. For anybody who's counting, we're on Hey Amud Beis, aka page 10, towards the bottom. Okay, I'll just read again what we just said. That Bi'ar Inyan, Api Masha Kasav Rachav Zal, B'Shara Kedusha, Beitz Chaim Shar Nun Perik Beis. The explanation of, we're trying to get to, again, who is the Beinoni, what's the essence of the Beinoni, what's his Avodah, the regular person who's actually an elevated person. How do we achieve this state that we realize that even emotionally it's very near to us to feel love and fear of Hashem and to be enamored with that is our daily avodah, thought, speech, and action for sure. So it's based on the understanding of what Rav Chaim Vital writes in Kisvei Arizal, the writings and teachings of the Arizal. The Holy Yisrael Echad Tzadik ve'Echad Rasha yesh shtei neshamas tichsiv neshamas ani asisi she'en shtei nefashes. That every Jew, no matter what state of being he is in, has two souls. As the pasuk says, souls, when referring to one person, I have made. Nefesh achas. Here's the new stuff. Nefesh achas mitzad klipa v'sitra achra. So the one soul comes from klipa and sitra achra. So those words have to be defined. Sitra achra will be defined in chapter 7, but we'll deal with klipa. Chapter 6 rather, we'll deal with klipa. Klipa means a shell, a peel or a shell. So the peel covers on what's inside. So if you didn't know that a particular, let's say Adam Arishan, when he first met the first fruit, maybe he didn't know what was inside. You think the only there's all that meets the eye is all that there is, and you have to open it up. It covers and also protects truly, but in this context, it hides what the true essence of the fruit is, which is this sweet, delicious and nutritious inner entity behind the peel or behind an egg peel or whatever it is. So the nefesh bahamis comes from what's called klipa. Klipa, again, klipa says, I am here, don't look any further. I'll give you two examples in, we'll call it food, and food is one and fear is another. Food has many layers to it. The klipa of food, I'm not talking about, here we're going to talk straight away about two levels of klipa. But a klipa in general, again, hides what is the true internal reality of whatever thing we're discussing. So we said about a fruit, the peel hides the fruit inside. By food in general, so what is the purpose of food? A person might not ask that when it comes time for dessert. Right? It comes time for dessert. It's so food. Part of the food experience might be good taste. Right? But that's not the essence of food. The essence of food is to give me energy. The physical essence of food. So that energy has to be clean. I wouldn't put olive oil into my car, even though olive oil might be a much more refined matter than neft, whatever from crude oil, from gasoline that we put into our cars. And I wouldn't obviously put gasoline into my body. But when it comes time to eat something, so I don't always think about what's the cheapest, what's the most delicious. There has to be the purpose behind it. The purpose is to give me a healthy body, so I can breathe properly. I can do whatever I have to do during the day. So the klipa is the actual taste of the food, or the presentation of the food. Definitely important things, but they're not the essence. If I go with presentation and I go with taste, I could be slowly killing myself. I have to realize that's just the klipa, that's just the outer shell. Mm-hmm. And really there's a purpose that's being hidden by that. I can't just engage with the klipa. Okay, that's in food. By the way, food has a much deeper concept. The concept of the energy of food is to be utilized to live a healthy life, not just have a healthy body. Why do I want to have a healthy body? So that's not an end in and of itself. The ultimate end is to take my healthy body and be productive. Why do I want to be productive? Actually, I want to serve Hashem. It's always going to come back to the godly core that is hidden by the klipa. So food, the external tasty and presentation and whatever food, even just the idea of having a healthy life, physically healthy life, all of that is klipa. It's not necessarily negative, even though we're going to get into the word ra is going to be associated with it. But it is not the ultimate purpose. It covers up on the purpose. I have to think and dig deeper. Ultimately, the core of everything would be the godliness that's covered by the klipa. Fear. Oftentimes people get bogged down by fear. So fear is externally, it's hiding on something else. It's a mechanism that we have that tells us and alerts us to the need to be cautious. You get afraid, you get the feeling of fear, because you know that you're near the edge, so you get that little jolt. Okay, but people their fear can overtake them, and it becomes an entity in and of themselves, and they become paralyzed. Okay, because they give too much credence to the feeling. They're always afraid and always nervous. They don't know how to actually use that fear to their benefit. It has a benefit. It's needed in Avodas Hashem as well, in the service of Hashem. So taking just the klipa is something that you're not looking towards what its purpose is, only taking for its external. So klipa, in the terms of nefesh bahamis, the animal soul, in terms of the antithesis of godliness, is that what becomes seen and engaged is only something that's very external. Okay, so klipa it has a godly spark, and even we're going to talk about presently a level of klipa that's going to say it has no good whatsoever, and right away we're going to qualify. It doesn't mean it has no good whatsoever, so I have to understand what it means, because everything has a godly spark in order to exist, as explained in the second book of Tanya. So but the access to the inner meaning of anything that exists, the question is, how covered up is it? Like our example of food or in fear. Or do I let fear take me over? Or do I engage food only because it tastes good and because it looks good? Or do I realize there's something deeper, and especially when I go to the godly core of everything?
So you're saying that the klipa of the human being is this body?
Animating soul is what we're going to call it. Okay, animal soul and animating soul are the same, a vitalizing soul. That let's describe it right away. So we say every Jew has two souls, and the one. So the end of the whole chapter from here on just talks about the one soul being the vitalizing soul, and the second chapter starts with and the second soul. The one soul is from klipa and sitra achra. Again, from the other side of kedusha, meaning it covers up on it. It has a godly source, but it screams out anything but that, as this will be described. V'hima mislabeshes b'dama adam, and this is the vitalizing force. It's a spiritual the difference between something that's alive and something that's not is palpable to the eye. You can't put your finger on. You can put your finger on a pulse, but you can't put your finger on vitality. You can palpably see the difference between a dead dog and a living dog. So he has some sort of spiritual life force that's enlivening him. So every body, including Jewish bodies, have a life force that's enlivening them, and that is this dressed up in the blood. We'll explain that in a second, but first, lahachi saguf, so it's this life force dressed in the blood of a person to give vitalization to the body, to enliven the body. Ukdichsiv, like the pasuk says, ki nefesh habasar badamhi, that the vitalizing soul, the fleshy soul, is inside of the blood. So that's how the Alter Rebbe learns that it's in the blood. The vitalizing soul meaning just the fact that you're alive and feeling like a living person feels, which is hungry, tired, conscious. That is from the vitalizing soul. As the verse says, the vitalizing soul is inside of the blood. The blood is everywhere in the body, giving life to the body. If a limb, God forbid, doesn't get blood, so that limb already, we call it sleeping. It feels sleeping, right, when you cut off the circulation. And eventually it could become, God forbid, a dead limb. Okay, so the blood is giving life to the body. That the vitalizing is inside of the blood.
But you call that life-giving entity the nefesh.
Right.
So you call the nefesh.
100%. That's a nefesh.
So the nefesh, you're equating the nefesh with the animalistic soul.
There are 5 levels to the godly soul, and one is also nefesh. But nefesh in its baseline meaning is life force. Okay, so then there's a nefesh hachiyonis, or a bahamis, or a nefesh habasar. Those are the 3 terminologies we just used. The animal soul, the vitalizing soul, or the fleshy soul. It's a life force. That's all it is. It's a life force. It gives life to the body. The body is illuminated by the life. Inside, we have deeper than that, dressed up in that, we have the godly soul. And we'll have to discuss, we'll introduce ourselves to the character of the animal soul, the character of the godly soul, the interaction between the two. And then we'll discuss what the innermost life of the person is, that godly soul. Similar to what we said before about food, for example. Food, you have the external taste and appearance. Then you have the fact that it gives me health and vitality and strength if I'm engaging in it on the level of the good in it, not just the external. But that itself is only an external klipa. That's good, vitality. Taste could be bad. If I'm in it for the taste, it could be harmful. If I'm in it for the vitality, it can't be bad in the sense of harming me. Okay? But that itself is only a klipa. The vitality in the food itself has to be elevated to kedusha. How do you do that? You take the vitality, you don't just make it an end in and of itself. Now it's good to be buff. Right?
I want to make sure I get the terminology right. You're saying that the animalistic soul is the nefesh.
Nefesh bahamis, nefesh hachiyonis. It's the animalistic soul, is the vitalizing soul. It is what gives the direct life to the body. There's a nefesh, there's a level of the godly soul, it's also called nefesh. There's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, yechida, 5 levels of the soul. Those all refer to the godly soul. And there's definitely the closest interplay between the nefesh, alokis, and the nefesh, habahamis, of the vitalizing soul. But the actual life force streaming in the blood of your body is your vitalizing soul. Okay? And that's klippa. Why it comes from klippa. What does it mean it comes from klippa? That's what the Alter Rebbe wants to describe now. Umimena bois kol amides rois mi arba yesodis roim sheba. From this klippa soul, which all it does, it feels itself as life. It doesn't feel its godly core. It feels itself as life. It needs to live. It wants to live, right? The basic tenet of everything that lives wants to stay alive. Huh?
It has its own autonomy.
It has its own autonomy, 100%. So it's actually made up of 4 elements. Okay, in Kabbalah it says, and in the Rambam it says, and Hakira it talks about 4 elements. It doesn't mean to negate smaller elements like the elemental chart or or atoms and so on, but they're everything physical is made up of 4 different characteristics. Okay, and they're referred to as earth, water, wind, and fire. And everything spiritual, therefore, too, has these elements. The correspondence between everything that's physical has a spiritual root. 4 elements. So again, it doesn't mean that they're not sub-elements, but those are common in everything that exists. So what are those 4 elements in the vitalizing soul? It also has 4 elements. Okay, when it feels itself and it feels what it needs, it can come out in a negative way. Because again, feeling itself already is hiding on godly core and becomes self-identity. And when that gets carried away, and you just are engaging in the peel, just engaging in the taste of the food and so on, here's what it looks like in a human. It has these 4 negative character traits that flow out of them, these 4 negative elements, which are Dahainu, Ka'as, V'gaiva, Me'yesei Eish, Shenegba L'mayla. For example, anger and haughtiness that come from the element of fire in the vitalizing soul, because anger is hot-headed, and gaiva is shenegba l'mayla, a person's haughty, fire goes up, so he feels himself higher than everybody else. Those are the aspects of fire of the animal soul. V'taives v'tanugim. And the desire for just what they call taiva, right? Just physical pleasure, and need for physical pleasure comes from the root, the yesod, the element of water, which water gives flavor to everything, gives its juices that make a person salivate, and when more water comes to the tree, the sweeter the fruit. So water and some things that are dry are a little bit like a dry steak is not as desirable as a juicy steak. Water gives the growth to everything that we eat and gives the taiva inside of it, the delight inside of it. So water is associated with the delight of the animal soul, just being involved in the external delights. V'hilalus v'leitzanus v'isparus v'dvarim b'teilim yesei ruach. And frivolity and scoffing and boasting and just talking about nothing all come from the element of wind, because they have no real content to them. There's no mamashus, there's nothing really there. So earlier he said gaiva, which is haughtiness, is fire, and boasting is wind. So what's the difference in Lashon HaKodesh between gaiva and isparus, boasting? That gaiva means you are great, but you just feel higher than everybody else because of it. Boasting is you're full of air. You just stop saying all these things that you can't really attribute to yourself. V'atzlus means say the offer. And laziness and depression from the element of earth, because those are heavy feelings. A person is lazy, or a person is depressed and he can't get out of bed, so he's feeling down and heavy. That's Yesod ha'afar, the element of heavy earth. V'gam midas tevis shebeteva kol Yisrael betuldosam k'mei rachmanus gmilas chasadim bois mimena. In a Jew, it says, from his vitalizing soul, from his animal soul, also comes some good midas that are natural to a Jew. As the Gemara says, list 3, here he lists 2, the Alter Rebbe, such as being merciful and bestowing kindness. They also come from the vitalizing soul. So the question will be, why, if klipa means that it's covering up on the godly entity and all you can see is the external, and therefore it's easily detached from godliness, like detaching the food, as we mentioned, the taste from the benefit of food, and when you get involved in that, so you're detached from what food really is. So being involved in klipa means that we detach from its godly source, and therefore a person can get angry, he can become totally immersed in taivas, he could become a scoffer, all sorts of things that he could, because he's detached from the inner core. Why would we say that in a Jew, some of those characters that come naturally to him, that are part of the klipa, that are part of the covering up of his godliness, are actually good character traits, such as, the Gemara lists, he's merciful and he is kind by nature. Why wouldn't that be from the godly soul? First question. Second of all, how? Well, first question was, how come good character traits come from klipa? And 2, why wouldn't that be a representative of his godly soul? So the Alter Rebbe answers the first one, and we'll answer the second, and we'll see how we're doing on time. Ki b'Yisrael nefesh zu de klipa hi me klipas noiga. Because in a Jew, this soul, the vitalizing soul, comes from what's called klipas noiga, a second level of klipa. We'll see in chapter 6, the Alter Rebbe will lay out 2 levels of klipa. Okay, one is called klipas noiga, one's called shalosh klipas atameis. Total, it's already mentioned here. The total impure klipas or a shiny klipa. The idea of a shiny klipa is that you can sense the light inside. If a klipa covers on what's inside, so you can't see and access to godliness at all. Just like you can't answer some peels and coverings totally hide what's inside. Sometimes I would get birthday gifts from my family, and they're in boxes and they're wrapped, but I'll guess what it is. Right? Even though it's covered in a box and it's covered in a wrapping, I know them and I know the panima, I know what I got. But sometimes, you put something really small in a huge opaque box and wrappings inside of wrappings, nobody can guess what's inside. So the totally impure klippas don't allow any access to the godly light that's inside. And the klipas nega, although it doesn't allow you to access the godliness, light sparkles, the goodness of what's there, and we'll have to make a distinction between goodness and godliness in a moment. But the goodness shines. So therefore, by a Jew whose vitalizing soul comes from the second level of klipa called klipas nega, the shining, there's goodness that comes naturally to a Jew. One of the character traits, or we know of the character traits of Jewish people by they belong to the Jewish nation, is that they are merciful and they are kind. They do kindness. It's by nature. That's the proof that it's not from the godly soul. If something comes from the godly soul, it has to come through real work. In other words, of course, a godly character trait is mercifulness and kindness. But that's not what we're talking about, what a Jew is born with. A Jew is born with wanting to be kind and being merciful. It might have nothing to do with God. It's like being healthy as opposed to eating for the sake of heaven. In our analogy from before, I can be involved in the total external, I want is the taste, or I can be involved in the health. Health is good. Energy, if I'm engaging in food for the energy, that's a positive thing. But or at least it's not a negative thing. It kind of borders on it, right? It has the ability to become my whole life is just about the energy, being healthy, looking great, and feeling great, and so on. But that's not supposed to be an end in and of itself. Use the energy to do something productive. What's that productive? Serve Hashem. Do something greater than yourself. Do something godly. So the same is true. In these midas. There's natural to a Jew to be merciful. Natural to a Jew to be a baishan. Also, it says to be tsanua, to be modest, and so on and so forth. But that's not necessarily godly. In order for it to become for a higher purpose, that's completely higher than himself, a godly purpose, that takes work. Not just because of my nature, but because Hashem expects it of me to elevate myself beyond physical, beyond my own limited self. That takes hard work. So since it's natural, it's clear it's coming from the natural soul, the vitalizing soul. But nonetheless, it's called good and not necessarily holy. and I have to know on time whether I'm going to...
You still got 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
So could you, I missed that. So are you saying that what is the source of the Jew wanting to do good? What is the source of it?
The vitalizing soul of a Jew comes from klipas nega. Klipas nega is called a shining shell. So even though, again, there's a shell that's completely opaque and doesn't allow you to know what's inside, so that's no access to the godly core. Everything has a godly core. The totally impure klippas are thick enough that you can't even see the godliness at all. They're totally lost in their outer shell. That fear took over. Right? We use fear as an example. A person lives his life in fear. And fear has not serving a purpose, which a fear is meant to serve a purpose for the human being. But he lives his life always nervous, always on fear. He doesn't want to go on the bus because he's in a car accident, whatever. He's just totally gripped by his fear. He's lost in the clip. He can't even get out of it anymore. He's totally lost in that external identity. A shining shell means that even though I can't access the godliness it's not readily accessible, the godliness. It needs work to realize that light that's shining through this less thick and harsh peel, it takes work to realize that there's something godly there, but there is goodness shining through. That godliness shines into the shell and makes a person feel naturally inclined towards goodness, not just negativity, not just totally immersed in lust or in laziness or in depression or all those other things that we mentioned before.
What do you call the source of that?
So that's called the shining, the klipas nega. We're going to be introduced to it in a much deeper way in chapter 6, is a merging between good and bad. Okay? The good is felt. The godliness is not felt. What is ultimately the good that's felt? So I give you the example of energy. Okay? Energy in food is itself good. Being engaged in food for the right purpose and being engaged in the energy. What is good? It can be elevated to godliness. So you take the goodness and you elevate it and you use it for the right purpose, to give yourself energy to serve Hashem. You take the good in fear and you use it to serve Hashem, not just to be...
You're saying that, what this means, you're saying that kindness is just good, it's not godly.
Correct. Because here's where it's going to get really interesting. Okay, so we have these 10 minutes, we'll do it. So we said, by a Jew, this natural soul, and again, it's natural because it comes with ease, no work to reach a godly elevation beyond self. It's just good. And the goodness characters that are natural to Jews, such as mercy and being kind, come from this soul. Why? That because in a Jew, this vitalizing soul, the animal vitalizing soul, klipa, covering on the godliness, nonetheless comes from klipas nega, sheish ba gam kein tov, which also has mixed into it good. Again, the shiny part, that the godliness is not perceived as godliness, but perceived as something that can be ultimately elevated. It's not ra. It's from the secret, meaning the inner aspect of the secret of the tree of life, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That everything has inside of it the good and evil, and the job is to extract the good and deflect at least the evil. I say at least because sometimes transform.
Well, you're suggesting that we didn't eat from the that we would be kind. Is that what you're saying? No. Before
eating from the tree, we would be only godly. There was no actually connection to klipa at all. But that's a whole other story. Actually, maybe that'll have to come out here a little bit also. But let me see if I can do a proper treatment of the next 5 lines in the time that we have or not, and maybe we'll pick it up there. Which is not the case with the souls of the nations. So they have vitalizing souls, obviously. Okay, the difference between a living body and a dead body. Everybody has a nefesh, a vitalizing. Every from animal up has a vitalizing soul. But their vitalizing soul, their nefesh, hein mishar klipas atamias, comes from the other impure klipas, not the noga klipa, not the shining klipa, but another level of klipa, she'ein bahen toiv klal, which has no good in it whatsoever. Now, okay, and it's going to get a little trickier and hairier, but we'll start with this. We don't mean, firstly, that it doesn't have good, even I said, remember, it's going to say no good whatsoever, but it doesn't mean no good whatsoever, because everything has godliness. It cannot exist without Hashem enlivening it and bringing it into existence, enlivening it and keeping it in existence. Right. So therefore there has to be good. It's godliness. But what it means is no access. And even that's going to be a difficult statement. Okay, it's covered up, like we said before. You can't tell what's inside. Now, before I continue, I just want to make I don't know if it's a disclaimer. We'll make one disclaimer and another maybe disclaimer. There is something called Chasidim Masailam. There is something called non-Jews who have good. Right? They're on some level servants of Hashem. So barring, we're not talking about them. We're talking about a regular state of non-Jew. I see now the comments are flipping out over here.
I'm sure they are. It's quite. Let's see. Go. You carry on.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll discuss them next time. I see even one is an old student.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Nice that he's on here. Okay. So what does it mean? What does it mean? So here's the other kind of disclaimer. We have to redefine what we mean by good and bad. Okay, it's not our classic. Just like before we said a Russia. But the way we described what a Russia is, we're all Russian. That doesn't feel right. You know? According to the Tanya, you have to be somebody who's 24/7, incapable of messing up thought, speech, and action 24/7. That's a basic impossibility. Even vafilu Talmud Torah, and even never relaxing when you shouldn't relax. Right? Not taking the extra bite of food that right? All that disconnects you from being this Beinoni. Okay, so what does that mean? You're Russia. You're going to be a great guy. You're going to be a great guy, but we're going to call you a Russia. We're trying to get to a new definition so that we can learn something about our inner workings and grow from it. So the same is true here. When we say good and bad, we don't necessarily mean we do not mean good and bad the way that we mean on the street. I could think of, unfortunately, a bunch of Yidden that maybe I wouldn't want to be neighbors with, you know. And we're saying they have good, and I can think of a bunch of non-Jews who I'd rather be the neighbor of in terms of kindness and gentle and nice and so on, and courteous, etc., etc. And we're going to say they have no good. So what's going on over here? So obviously they're being good, and we're going to call it actually in a minute. We're going to say chesed lumim chatas. The kindness of the nations is sin. But we're calling it kindness. So make up your mind, what is it? Okay, what are we actually trying to say over here? Okay, that's the half disclaimer. Now we're going to read inside and hopefully we'll make sense of it. So I'll just read that crazy line again. Mashen kein nafshes umes ha'elam hein mishar klipos tamei shein bem tovkla. Kamishikaso beitz chaim shar mem tes. That's what it says in the writings of the Rizal. Perek Gimel. It says, "V'chol tivei da'avdin umes ha'elam legarmehu avdin." Everything, all good, and again it's called good, but which we just called they don't have good. Now we're saying it's good. So we'll redefine the two types of good we're discussing. We're going to have good, actually good, and godly. Those are our three levels of good. Okay, the good of the nations is evil, but it's good, but it's evil. The goodness of natural to a Jew is good but not godly, and then there's godly. Okay? So the good that the nations do, they're doing it for themselves. As the Gemara says on the Pasuk, that the kindness of the nations, they're doing charity, they're doing good deeds, is sin. What does it mean? That all the goodness they do is for their own selves. Now there's levels to this. It does not mean, by the way, that a Jew is not susceptible to this. Of course. I could have ulterior motives. I do something, and I can have ulterior motives. What we're trying to say about the non-Jews, which is intense, is they can't not have ulterior motives. Now, but the idea of ulterior motives is very, very subtle. You can have somebody who's two-faced. He's doing goodness to you because he wants to take advantage of you. So then, what are you receiving? It's good. He's doing me favors, wonderful, but really he just wants to steal from me later. So it's not actually good. Okay? But my reception is of a good, kind behavior of the person who's showing me. Then you have somebody who's not trying to take advantage of me. He actually doesn't like me. He doesn't want to take advantage of me, but he's behaving nicely. And inside he's telling everybody like, oh, this guy, here he comes again. Hey, how are you? So he's not actually trying to hurt me. Okay? But then what about even when he wants to help? He actually feels good and says, oh, here comes this guy. I love this guy. And even a guy I don't love, I want to do him favors. He's hurting. I want to help him. what we're trying to say over here is he's still doing it to help himself. What does that mean? You can have, here's an example I once heard. You can have somebody who works as a medic, or he doesn't even work as a medic. He just, everywhere he goes, he's like Batman. Everywhere he goes, he takes care of the bad things going on over there. He sees people in pain, he goes and he helps them out. He sees people, he hears about somebody who needs a medic, and he takes them straight to the hospital. Before the ambulance comes, he's there. Certainly if he sees it, or he sees even a bird bleeding, he goes and he helps and nurses back to health. What could be going on is that the person himself can't stand when he hurts when other people hurt. He's really taking care of his own pain. It's not about the bird, it's about that he can't stand to see a bird in pain. It's subtle. He's not actually caring about the bird, he's caring about, I can't be somebody who can look at the bird, it hurts me. So better to take care of the bird than for me to feel the pain. But in fact, I would say most people feel that way about birds. Actually caring about the bird, it hurts me. But to care about the other person for the other person's sake has nothing to do with my, certainly not personal benefit, not God forbid taking advantage, not even benefit, but also not even to take care of some inner pain that I'm having. It's only the other person, his need that I am engaging in. That's true good. It's selfless. So good by definition is selfless. The good that we're describing, the chesed, the umim, is not selfless good. It could be giving away tons of money, but it makes them feel good. And I'm not saying that by a Jew it doesn't make him feel good. But by a Jew, even if it doesn't make him feel good, he knows he has to do it. Even if it hurts, he's going to do it. Because he has to do it. It's part of his nature. To do it because it needs to be done, not because he feels good from doing it, not because he gets something benefit out of it. Godly good is something else entirely. The only reason that he's engaged in this kindness is because there's a commandment to be engaged in the kindness. It's not about me at all. Not even on the level of my natural inclination. Not my natural inclination to feel like I'm missing something if you're missing something. Or not my natural inclination that is truly good, selfless, that you need something and that's all that matters to me. It doesn't matter if I get anything or feel any positive from it. True goodness is godliness, which is totally enveloped in something way higher than humanity can possibly fathom. We'll have to get back into that.
So you're saying that is only there for the Jewish soul because they have the mitzvah to do the good.
Well, right, but we're a step before that. The natural goodness that belongs to the Jewish people, which is right, there's signs to being a Jew. I'm trying to I watched a video recently where the rabbi got a little bit in trouble because he got ahead of himself. He said he doesn't believe in. I'm hoping. I'm not. The other rabbi's famous, so I don't think I'll have trouble. But he said
you're gonna be famous.
He said I don't think that the Torah Parasha are Jews. This is what he said. So he got into trouble for it, and he's a big Jew lover himself. Clearly, every time he speaks. But he wasn't trying to say they're not halakhically Jewish. But he had this feeling, okay, the Torah Parasha is celebrating Hamas. Okay, they celebrate what Hamas did. So that's not a Jewish attribute.
Right.
The feeling is that can't be a Jew.
Right.
Okay, and he tried to, he walked it back a little bit, but he was explaining his intent. A Jew doesn't. Not all goyim are Hamas, God forbid. Of course not. Okay, but it's almost normal for those people marching on all over the streets from the river to the sea who are not Hamas and they mean well and so on and so forth. Okay, but for a Jew to behave like that, you don't think he's Jewish. He can't behave that way.
Right.
By the way, he can behave that way, right? But I'm saying it's not natural to the Jew. And that's the point that we're making over here. What's natural is mercy, what's natural is kindness, and the fact that it's natural, it's because our vitalizing soul comes from a klipa. It's true, it's still not godly, but it has good shining through it.
He's saying they're not Jewish, but what he means is it's not Jewish.
Right.
It's not Jewish.
Right, that's a good way for, we should tell him that's
Thank you. Okay, very good, well done.
Okay.
Getting juicy.